The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was buzzing with noise. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their special chairs, talking and arguing about trade routes and mining rights. It was just another normal day in the center of Galactic Power. Jake Morrison stood at the human speaking platform, his hands folded behind his back. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 20 years he had been Earth's voice in this chamber. He had made friends here, solved problems, and helped build peace between worlds that had been fighting for centuries. But today was different. Today, Jake looked around the room and saw something that made his heart heavy. The other ambassadors were not really listening to him. They were checking their data tablets, whispering to their assistants, or simply looking bored. When he had tried to speak about the pirate attacks on human cargo ships, Chairman Vexthari had waved his hand and said it was a minor issue. Minor issue, Jake repeated quietly to himself. 37 human crew members had died in those attacks. Their families would never see them again. But to the council, it was just paperwork. Jake cleared his throat and stepped closer to the speaking device. The room slowly got quiet. He looked around at faces he had known for decades. There was Ambassador Kreltok from the Rigel system, who had borrowed human technology for his planet's hospitals. There was Trade Minister Yuldan, whose people had been saved from famine by human food shipments. There was General Mortex, whose military had learned their best tactics from human officers. Honorable Council members, Jake began, his voice calm and steady. I have served as Earth's representative for 2 decades. In that time, humanity has tried to be a good neighbor to all species in this galaxy. Some of the ambassadors nodded. Politely, but Jake could see they were still not really paying attention. Ambassador Kreltok was actually reading a report about something else. We have shared our medical knowledge freely, Jake continued. We have helped build schools on 17 different worlds. We have sent our best engineers to fix problems on planets we had never even visited before. We have asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. Chairman Vexthari, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms, made a small gesture with one hand. Yes, Ambassador Morrison, humanity's contributions are noted in the record. Is there a specific matter you wish to discuss today? Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach, noted in the record. 20 years of friendship, sacrifice, and cooperation, and it was just noted in the record. I came here today to discuss the attack on the human colony ship New Hope, Jake said. 200 families were killed when pirates destroyed their ship near the Vega system. This was the 5th attack on human vessels in that area this month. Ambassador Zrintel from the Centauri Federation made a clicking sound with his mouth. The Outer Rim has always been dangerous, Ambassador Morrison. Perhaps humans should avoid those areas if they cannot protect themselves properly. Several other ambassadors made sounds of agreement. Jake looked around the room and saw nods from beings he had considered friends. His chest felt tight. Cannot protect ourselves? Jake asked quietly. The New Hope was a civilian ship carrying families to start a new life. It was not armed. It was flying through space that the Council promised was safe for all species. Well, said Minister Yuldan, maybe your people should have asked for an escort. We cannot protect everyone all the time. Jake stared at him. Just 3 years ago, when Yuldan's homeworld was running out of food, human cargo ships had made dangerous trips through pirate space to bring supplies. They had not asked for escorts. They had not complained about the danger. They had simply helped because people were hungry. I see, Jake said slowly. He looked around the room one more time. These beings had taken human help for granted for so long that they had forgotten it was help at all. They thought humans were supposed to solve problems, supposed to give freely, supposed to ask for nothing. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It was a communication unit that connected directly to Earth's government. He pressed a button and spoke clearly. This is Ambassador Morrison. Initiate Protocol 7. The room went quiet. Several ambassadors looked confused. Chairman Vexthari leaned forward in his chair. Protocol 7? He asked. What is Protocol 7? Jake put the device away and looked directly at the chairman. Protocol 7 is humanity's withdrawal from all galactic affairs, effective immediately. The silence in the room was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. Jake could hear the soft hum of the air systems and nothing else. Withdrawal? Ambassador Kreltok finally said. What do you mean, withdrawal? I mean, Jake said, his voice still calm. That humanity is done. We are closing our embassies. We are ending our trade agreements. We are pulling our people out of joint projects. We are going home. Chairman Vexthari stood up, his forearms moving in confusion. Ambassador Morrison, you cannot be serious. There are protocols for this kind of thing. There are procedures. You cannot just leave. Watch us, Jake said simply, as if his words were a signal. Every human in the council building began walking toward the exits. Dr. Amy Carter, who had been working on a cure for the Rigelian plague, closed her research files and walked out of the medical wing. Captain Lisa Hayes, who had been coordinating defense against pirate attacks, shut down her command center and left the military section. Engineer Ben Rodriguez, who had been designing new starports, gathered his blueprints and headed for the door. Jake picked up his briefcase and started walking toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear the council members talking loudly, their voices full of confusion and growing panic. Morrison, wait, Chairman Vexthari called out. We can discuss this. Whatever the problem is, we can fix it. Jake stopped and turned around. For a moment, he looked sad. The problem, Chairman, is that you do not see a problem. You never did. Then he walked out of the chamber, leaving behind 20 years of service and friendship. Within hours, the human exodus had begun across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler 438b, human supervisors handed over their equipment to local workers and boarded ships for home. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, human scientists deleted their files and packed their belongings. On the trade hub of Alpha Centauri, human merchants closed their shops and canceled their contracts. The other species watched in growing alarm as human ships lifted off from planets throughout the galaxy. These were not just any ships leaving. These were the ships that brought food to hungry worlds. These were the ships that carried medicine to plague-stricken planets. These were the ships that patrolled trade routes and kept pirates away. On the planet Rigel Prime, the local government tried to stop Dr. Amy Carter from leaving. They offered her more money, better working conditions, anything she wanted. But she just shook her head and walked onto her ship. The cure for the Rigelian plague, which had killed millions of people, died with her departure. Captain Lisa Hayes received similar pleas from the Combined Fleet Command. They needed her strategic mind, they said. They needed her leadership. Without her, the defense networks would fall apart. But Lisa had made her choice. She programmed her ship's computer to delete all military data and headed for Earth. The hardest part was not the leaving. The hardest part was the silence. The humans did not shout or make threats. They did not demand apologies or explanations. They simply left, quietly and completely, like guests who had finally realized they were not really welcome at the party. By the end of the week, every human in council space was gone. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and much lonelier. And in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, 46 species sat in their chairs and wondered what they had just lost. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was starting to feel the pain. Captain Zorkith of the Rigelian Defense Force stared at his tactical display with growing fear. Red dots covered the screen like a disease. Each dot represented a pirate attack, and there were more every day. The Outer Rim territories, once peaceful and safe, had become a hunting ground for criminals. Sir, his communications officer said, we have another distress call from the freight convoy near Vega 7. Pirates are attacking the cargo ships. Zorkith rubbed his tired eyes. This was the 4th attack today. His ships were spread too thin across the galaxy. They could not be everywhere at once. Send the closest patrol ship, he ordered, knowing it would probably arrive too late. Before the humans left, this would never have happened. Captain Lisa Hayes had run the Joint Defense Network like a perfect machine. Her human ships had patrolled the most dangerous areas, and her tactical planning had kept the pirates scattered and weak. She had shared her strategies with all the other species, teaching them how to predict pirate movements and set up effective ambush. But now Lisa was gone, and the other species were learning a hard truth. They had never really understood how she did it. They had just followed her orders and taken credit for the victories. Sir, the communications officer said again, the patrol ship reports that the convoy is destroyed, no survivors. Zorkith closed his eyes. 67 beings had died in that convoy. Their families would never see them again. And somewhere in the galaxy, the pirates were celebrating another easy victory. On the other side of the galaxy, Trade Minister Yul'dan was having his own problems. His office on the planet Centauri Prime was full of angry merchants and worried government officials. The holographic displays showed shipping routes that were falling apart like old rope. "The food shipments from the agricultural worlds are 3 weeks late," reported his assistant, a nervous young being named Colvin. "The medicine from the pharmaceutical collective has been delayed indefinitely, and the manufactured goods from the industrial sector are piling up in warehouses because there are no ships to carry them." Yul'dan looked at the mess on his desk. Bills that could not be paid, contracts that could not be fulfilled, planets that were running out of food and medicine. "What about the emergency supply ships?" he asked. "Sir, most of the emergency supply ships were human-operated. They took them when they left." Yul'dan felt a cold fear in his stomach. He had always thought the humans were just one species among many. He had not realized how much of the galaxy's trade network depended on their ships, their pilots, and their organizational skills. "Get me a meeting with the Transportation Guild," he ordered. "We need to find new ships and new routes." But Colvin shook his head sadly. "Sir, I already tried. The Transportation Guild says they do not have enough ships to replace the human fleet. And even if they did, they do not know how to maintain the routing systems that the humans built." The routing systems. Yul'dan had forgotten about those. The humans had created a complex network of navigation beacons, communication relays, and traffic control systems that help ships move safely and efficiently throughout the galaxy. It had taken them decades to build, and they had maintained it without asking for payment. Now that network was starting to fail. Without human technicians to fix problems and update the software, ships were getting lost, colliding with each other, or taking dangerously long routes to their destinations. On the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Felmar stared at the empty laboratory that had once belonged to Dr. Amy Carter. The human scientist had worked here for 15 years, quietly developing cures for diseases that affected dozens of different species. Her work had saved millions of lives, but she had never asked for recognition or reward. Dr. Felmar had been Amy's research partner, but now he realized he had been more like her assistant. She had done the complex theoretical work while he had followed her instructions and helped with the experiments. He had thought he understood her methods, but without her guidance, he was lost. The laboratory's main computer still contained some of Amy's research data, but it was all encrypted with human security codes. She had locked it before leaving, and no one knew how to break the encryption. Years of medical breakthroughs were sitting right there, but they might as well have been on another planet. "Dr. Felmar," his assistant called from the doorway. "We have an emergency communication from Rigel Prime. The plague is getting worse." Felmar felt sick. The Rigelian plague had been contained for 3 years, thanks to Amy's treatment protocols. But now, without her constant monitoring and adjustment of the medicine, the disease was adapting and spreading again. "How many new cases?" he asked. 17,000 in the last week. "The hospitals are running out of space." Felmar sat down heavily in his chair. 17,000 people were sick, and he did not know how to help them. Amy would have known what to do. She would have analyzed the new strain of the plague, modified the treatment, and had a cure ready within days. But Amy was gone, and she had taken her knowledge with her. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Proxima 7, chaos was taking over. The planet's factories had once been models of efficiency and worker safety, thanks to the management style of Ben Rodriguez. The human factory owner had treated his alien workers with respect and fairness, paying them good wages and providing safe working conditions. But when Ben left, he had sold his factories to local buyers who had very different ideas about business. The new owners cut wages, removed safety equipment, and extended working hours. They said they were making the factories more profitable, but the workers were suffering. Ticklin, a factory worker who had been employed by Ben for 8 years, looked around the assembly line with sadness. The machines were breaking down more often because the new owners had fired the maintenance staff. The air was thick with toxic fumes because they had turned off the ventilation systems. Workers were getting injured because the safety barriers had been removed. "I miss Mr. Rodriguez," Ticklin said to his friend Varden during their short lunch break. He cared about us. These new bosses only care about money? Varden nodded sadly. I heard that 3 workers died in the chemical plant yesterday. The safety systems that Ben installed were removed last week. The situation was getting worse every day. Without Ben's careful management, the factories were becoming dangerous places to work. Production was actually falling because tired and scared workers made more mistakes. But the new owners did not understand this. They just demanded that the workers work faster and harder. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, Chairman Stori was receiving reports from across the galaxy, and every report was bad news. Pirate attacks were increasing, trade routes were collapsing, diseases were spreading, industrial accidents were rising. The economy was falling apart. How did this happen so quickly? He asked his advisors during an emergency meeting. His chief of staff, elderly being named Mortel, looked through his data files. Sir, it appears that humans were involved in many more activities than we realized. They were not just participants in galactic civilization. They were often the ones holding it together. Stori felt confused and angry. But they were just one species among 47. How could they be so important? Because, Mortel said quietly, they were the ones who did the work that no one else wanted to do. They patrolled the dangerous areas that other species avoided. They took the jobs that were difficult or dangerous. They solved problems that others could not solve. And they did it all without asking for credit or reward. The truth was becoming clear, but it was too late. The humans were gone, and they had taken with them the invisible threads that held galactic civilization together. The other species were learning that they had not been partners with humanity. They had been dependent on them, and now they were alone. The investigation had been going on for 2 months, and Chairman Stori was getting more worried with each new report. His team of researchers had been digging through old records, interviewing former human colleagues, and trying to understand exactly what the galaxy had lost when humanity left. The results were shocking. Sir, said his chief investigator, Dr. Nalvex, as she entered his office with a thick stack of files, we have completed the analysis of human contributions to galactic civilization. The numbers are disturbing. Stori looked up from his desk, which was covered with reports about the growing chaos across the galaxy. Tell me. Dr. Nalvex opened the first file. In the medical field alone, humans were responsible for developing treatments for 34 different diseases affecting various species. Dr. Amy Carter's work saved an estimated 47 million lives over her career. Dr. Helen Brooks prevented 17 different plague outbreaks. Dr. Mike Wilson created the universal blood substitute that is used in hospitals across the galaxy. She opened another file. In engineering, human designs were used in 63% of all major infrastructure projects. Kevin Thompson prevented the reactor disaster on Centauri Prime. Sarah Johnson designed the water purification systems that serve over 200 worlds. Carl Martinez created the food distribution network that has prevented famine on 41 planets. Stori felt his stomach growing cold. Continue. In military defense, humans provided 78% of the strategic planning for the combined fleet. They patrolled the most dangerous areas of space and developed the tactics that kept pirate activity at manageable levels. Captain Lisa Hayes personally prevented 12 major conflicts from escalating into full-scale wars. Dr. Nalvex kept reading. In trade and commerce, humans operated 32% of all cargo ships, 47% of all emergency supply runs, and maintained the entire galactic navigation network. They also provided free technical support to smaller species who could not afford advanced systems. The list went on and on. Education systems, environmental cleanup, disaster relief, research and development. In every field, humans had been quietly working behind the scenes, solving problems and helping others without asking for recognition. But that's not the worst part, Dr. Nalvex said quietly. We also found evidence that many species have been taking credit for human innovations. The Rigelian medical breakthrough that won the Nobel Prize last year, it was actually developed by Dr. Amy Carter. The Centauri military strategy that ended the border wars, it was created by General Bob Stevens. The vegan agricultural techniques that increased crop yields by 300%, They were invented by farmer Don Phillips. Vexthari stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the city of New Geneva, the capital of the Galactic Council. The buildings were still impressive, but he knew that many of the systems that kept the city running had been designed by humans. The power grid, the transportation network, the communication systems, all of them were starting to fail without human maintenance. "How did we not know this?" he asked. "Because humans never demanded credit," Dr. Nalvex replied. "They just did the work and let others take the glory. They seem to care more about helping people than about being recognized for it." Vexthari felt a deep shame settling in his chest. He had spent decades dismissing humans as newcomers, as junior partners in galactic civilization. But the truth was that humans had been the ones holding everything together. "There's something else," Dr. Nalvex said, her voice even quieter. "We found a recording from the Council's closed session 3 months ago. The one that happened the day before Ambassador Morrison announced the human withdrawal." Vexthari turned around. "What recording?" Dr. Nalvex activated a holographic display. It was automatically recorded by the Council's security system. All closed sessions are recorded, but this one was classified and forgotten. Until now, the display showed the Council's private meeting room. Vexthari recognized the date. It was the day before Jake Morrison had stood up and announced humanity's departure. In the recording, the Council members were discussing territorial disputes and trade agreements. "The humans are becoming too influential," said Ambassador Kreltak on the recording. "They act like they know better than everyone else." "I agree," replied Trade Minister Yuldan. "They need to learn their place. They have only been in space for a few hundred years. What can they possibly teach species that have been traveling? The stars for millennia?" General Mortex nodded. "Their military strategies are too aggressive. They take too many risks. Perhaps it is time to limit their role in the combined fleet." On the recording, Vexthari watched himself lean forward. "I have been thinking the same thing. The humans have forgotten that they are the newest members of this council. Maybe we should remind them by restricting their activities to their own solar system." The other council members made sounds of agreement. They talked about limiting human trade licenses, reducing their access to advanced technology, and removing them from important committees. They discussed these plans as if the humans were children who needed to be disciplined, but then the recording showed something that made Vexthari's blood run cold. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, sat Ambassador Jake Morrison. He had been invited to the meeting to discuss a minor trade issue, but he had arrived early. He had been sitting there listening to everything on the recording. Jake's face showed no anger, no surprise, just deep sadness. He had heard his supposed friends and allies discussing how to diminish his people's role in the galaxy. He had listened to species that owed their lives to human help talk about putting humans in their place. Jake had sat there for 20 minutes, listening to the casual dismissal of everything his people had done for the galaxy. Then he had quietly stood up and walked out of the room. The other council members had been so busy talking that they had not even noticed him leave. "Oh no," Vexthari whispered as he watched the recording. He heard everything. Dr. Nalvex nodded. He went straight from that meeting to the human embassy. Within hours, he had contacted Earth and requested authorization for Protocol 7. The next day, he stood in the council chamber and announced humanity's withdrawal. Vexthari felt sick. The humans had not left because of some external threat or internal crisis. They had left because they had discovered that their supposed allies were planning to betray them. They had left because they had learned that all their years of service and sacrifice meant nothing to the people they had tried to help. "We need to contact them," Vexthari said desperately. "We need to apologize. We need to explain that we made a mistake." But Dr. Nalvex shook her head. "Sir, we have been trying to contact them for months. Every message we send is returned unopened. Every ambassador we send to the Sol system is turned away at the border. They do not want to talk to us." Vexthari collapsed back into his chair. "What have we done? We destroyed the trust of the only species that truly cared about the welfare of the entire galaxy," Dr. Nalvex said sadly. "And now we are living with the consequences." The truth was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. News reports were revealing the extent of human contributions to galactic civilization. People were learning that their lives had been saved by human doctors they had never heard of, that their worlds had been protected by human soldiers who had never asked for thanks, that their civilizations had been built on foundations laid by human engineers who had worked in silence on Rigel Prime. The families of plague victims were learning that Dr. Amy Carter had spent 15 years of her life developing the treatments that had saved their loved ones. They were also learning that the Rigelian government had never even sent her a thank you note. On Centauri Prime, the population was discovering that human engineer Kevin Thompson had prevented a reactor disaster that would have killed 15 billion people. He had worked for 72 hours straight to fix the problem, and then he had quietly returned to his regular job without telling anyone what he had done. On Vega 7, the miners were finding out that Human Safety Inspector Jennifer Roberts had been secretly upgrading their equipment for years, preventing cave-ins and equipment failures that would have killed thousands of workers. She had paid for the upgrades with her own money, because the mining company had refused to spend the funds. The galaxy was finally understanding what they had lost, but it was too late. The humans were gone, and they had made it clear that they were not coming back. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, 46 species sat in their chairs and faced the truth. They had driven away the best friends they had ever had, and now they were alone in a galaxy that was falling apart around them. 2 years had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was dying. Chairman Vex Stori stood on the observation deck of his personal ship, staring at the edge of the Sol system. Behind him, the galaxy was in chaos. Wars raged across the outer rim territories. Plague had returned to dozens of worlds. The economy had collapsed into isolated pockets of struggling civilizations. The grand dream of galactic unity had become a nightmare of conflict and suffering, but ahead of him, the Sol system glowed with peaceful light. Human ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with technologies that the rest of the galaxy had never seen. New space stations orbited the outer planets, and the asteroid belt was filled with mining operations that made the old council facilities look primitive. "Sir," said his communications officer, a young Rigelian named Takaran, "we are receiving a transmission from the Human Border Patrol." Vex Stori straightened his uniform and walked to the communication station. "Put it through." The holographic display activated, showing the face of a human woman in a military uniform. She had short brown hair and calm green eyes, but her expression was cold and formal. "This is Admiral Patricia Stone of the Sol Defense Force," she said. "You are entering restricted space. State your business." Vex Stori stepped forward. "Admiral Stone, I am Chairman Vex Stori of the Galactic Council. I have come to speak with your government about the current situation in the galaxy." Admiral Stone's expression did not change. "The Sol system is closed to all foreign vessels. Please turn around and leave immediately." "Admiral, please," Vex Stori said, his voice desperate. "The galaxy is falling apart. We need humanity's help. We need to talk about the future." For a moment, Admiral Stone said nothing. Then she spoke in a voice that was calm but filled with steel. "Chairman Vex Stori, 2 years ago, your council made it clear that humanity was not welcome as an equal partner in galactic civilization. We accepted your decision and acted accordingly. We have no interest in changing that arrangement." "But we made a mistake," Vex Stori pleaded. "We know that now. We have learned how much we depended on your people. We want to apologize. We want to make things right." Admiral Stone's eyes grew colder. "Make things right? Tell me, Chairman, what would you like to make right? The fact that you plan to restrict us to our own solar system? The fact that you took credit for our innovations? The fact that you dismissed the deaths of our people as minor issues?" Vex Stori felt his heart sink. They knew about the recording. They knew about the secret meeting. They knew everything. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "We were fools. We let pride and prejudice cloud our judgment. But the galaxy is suffering without you. Billions of people are dying because we no longer have your help." Admiral Stone was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad but firm. "Chairman, we came to the galaxy with open hearts and extended hands. We offered our knowledge, our friendship, our very lives in service of a greater community. We asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. She paused, looking directly at Vexthari through the transmission. Instead, we received condescension, exploitation, and betrayal. We watched as other species took credit for our work. We listened as our supposed allies planned to diminish our role in the galaxy. We mourned our dead while you dismissed their sacrifices unimportant. But we can change, Vexthari said desperately. We can do better. We can treat you as equals. We can give you the respect you deserve. No, Admiral Stone said simply, you cannot. Because you do not understand what equality means. You think it means giving us a seat at your table. But true equality means that we do not need your permission to exist. It means that we do not need your approval to thrive. It means that we do not need you at all. Behind Admiral Stone, Vexthari could see other humans working at various stations. They looked confident and content. They looked like people who had found their place in the universe and were happy with it. We have learned to live without you, Admiral Stone continued. We have built our own civilization, our own trade networks, our own alliances. We have colonies on 100 worlds and friends among a dozen species who actually value our partnership. We do not need the Council anymore. But what about the other species? Vexthari asked. What about the people who are suffering because of our mistakes? Admiral Stone's expression softened slightly. We are not heartless, Chairman. We have maintained contact with a few species who always treated us with respect. The Altarian Republic, the Tau Ceti Collective, and the Epsilon Eridani Federation still trade with us. We still share medical knowledge with them. We still help them when they ask. But for the rest of the galaxy, we are done. We will not return to a community that never truly accepted us. We will not sacrifice our people for beings who do not value their lives. We will not build bridges for those who enjoyed burning them. Down. Vexthari felt tears forming in his eyes. So this is it? This is how it ends? This is how it ends for the Galactic Council, Admiral Stone said. But it is not the end for humanity. We are thriving, Chairman. We are growing. We are exploring new worlds and making new discoveries. We are building a future that does not depend on the approval of those who once dismissed us. The transmission ended and Vexthari was left staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew worked quietly, but he could see the sadness in their faces. They all knew that they had just witnessed the final chapter of the old galaxy. Sir, Tokran said softly, what should we do now? Vexthari walked back to the observation deck and looked out at the human ships patrolling the border. They moved with purpose and confidence, protecting a civilization that had learned to stand on its own. We go home, he said quietly. We go back to what is left of the galaxy and try to clean up the mess we made. As his ship turned away from the Sol system, Vexthari thought about the reports he had been receiving. The Rigel system was still fighting the plague that had returned after Dr. Amy Carter left. The Centauri Federation was struggling with power shortages after their human engineers departed. The vegan collective was facing famine because their food distribution network had collapsed, but there were also signs of hope. Some species were learning to work together without the Council's interference. The Altarian Republic had formed a new alliance with several smaller species, based on mutual respect and shared resources. The Tau Ceti Collective had developed new technologies by combining the knowledge of different species. Maybe, Vexthari thought, the galaxy could survive without the humans. Maybe the other species could learn to solve their own problems and build their own future. It would take time and many would suffer, but it was possible, but it would never be the same. The galaxy had lost something precious when the humans left. It had lost the one species that truly cared about the welfare of all. It had lost the bridge builders, the problem solvers, the quiet heroes who worked in the shadows to make life better for everyone. As Vexthari's ship jumped to hyperspace, he took one last look at the Sol system. The human ships continued their patrol, protecting a civilization that had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to help others is to help yourself first. The Galactic Council still existed, but it governed a broken galaxy. In their archives, they kept records of the Golden Age, when humans had been part of their community. It served as a reminder of their greatest failure and their deepest regret. The humans had departed without a word of anger or hatred. Their silence had spoken louder than any condemnation, and the galaxy would spend centuries learning to live with what they had lost through their own pride and foolishness. In the end, the humans had taught the galaxy one final lesson. Respect is not something that can be demanded or taken. It must be earned, and once lost, it may never be recovered. The stars continued to shine. But the galaxy was a lonelier place without humanity's light. 5 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the galaxy had learned to live with scars that would never fully heal. Captain Zorkith stood on the bridge of his new ship, watching the latest convoy of refugee vessels fleeing from the outer rim. The ships were old and damaged, carrying families who had lost everything to the endless pirate raids. His patrol fleet was stronger now than it had been 3 years ago, but it was still not enough to protect everyone. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the convoy leader is requesting permission to settle on Rigel 7. They say they have nowhere else to go." Zorkith nodded sadly. Rigel 7 was already overcrowded with refugees from 12 different worlds. The planet's resources were stretched thin, but they could not turn away people who needed help. "Grant permission," he said, "and send word to the Council. We need more supply ships for the refugee camps." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the Council says they have no more ships available. They are all being used for emergency missions in other sectors." This was the new reality. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Instead of governing a peaceful galaxy, it spent all its time responding to crises. Pirates attacked trade routes. Plagues spread from world to world. Economic collapse left entire star systems in poverty. Wars broke out between species that had once been allies. The council members worked harder than ever, but they were always one step behind the problems. They had learned to appreciate the quiet efficiency that humans had brought to galactic civilization, but that knowledge came too late to save them from the consequences of their mistake. On the planet Centauri Prime, Dr. Felmar walked through the halls of the medical research center that had once been Amy Carter's laboratory. The facility was still operational, but it had never recovered from losing its most brilliant scientist. The Rigelian plague had finally been contained again, but only after it had killed 3 million people. The cure had taken Dr. Felmar and his team 4 years to develop, compared to the few weeks it would have taken Dr. Carter. Every day during those 4 years, he had thought about the lives that could have been saved if Amy had still been there. "Doctor," his assistant called from the next room, "we have received another request for help from the vegan system. They are dealing with a new outbreak of crop disease." Dr. Felmar sighed and walked to his desk. The requests for help never stopped coming. Diseases that had been defeated years ago were returning stronger than before. New plagues were spreading faster than anyone could develop treatments. The galaxy's medical knowledge was advancing, but slowly and at a terrible cost in lives. He picked up a photo from his desk that showed him and Amy working together in the old days. She was smiling and pointing at something on a computer screen, probably excited about some new discovery. He remembered how she would work 18 hours a day when people were suffering, never complaining about the long hours or the difficult conditions. "We will do what we can," he told his assistant. "Send a team to Vega 5. Tell them to take all the medical supplies they can carry." But even as he gave the order, Dr. Felmar knew it would not be enough. It was never enough anymore. Meanwhile, in the prosperous Altarian Republic, Ambassador Kolthik was preparing for another meeting with human representatives. The Altarians had been one of the few species to maintain good relations with humanity after the Exodus, and they had benefited greatly from that friendship. "The humans have agreed to share their new medical technology with us," Kolthik told his staff during their morning briefing. "They have also offered to help us establish trade routes with their other allies." His economic advisor, a young Altarian named Delmora, looked excited. "Sir, if we can get access to human shipping networks, our trade volume could increase by 300%, Kolthik smiled. The Altarians had always treated humans as equals, even when other species looked down on them. That respect had paid off in ways they could never have imagined. While the rest of the galaxy struggled with economic collapse, the Altarian Republic was experiencing unprecedented prosperity. "The humans have also invited us to join their new research alliance," Kolthik continued. "They are working with the Tau Ceti Collective and the Epsilon Eridani Federation on projects that could revolutionize space travel." Delmora shook her head in amazement. It is hard to believe that the Council once considered the humans to be inferior. Their technology is advancing so fast that we can barely keep up. That was the strange irony of the situation. The species that had dismissed humans as newcomers were now watching them become the dominant force in their region of space. Human colonies were thriving on dozens of worlds. Human ships patrolled vast areas of space, keeping them safe from pirates and other threats. Human scientists were making discoveries that put the old Council research to shame, but the humans were not trying to build an empire. Instead, they were creating a loose confederation of species based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation. Any species that wanted to join was welcome, as long as they were willing to treat others as equals. The contrast with the old Council could not have been more obvious. The Council had been based on hierarchy and control. The Human Confederation was based on partnership and shared goals. The Council had demanded loyalty and tribute. The humans asked only for friendship and fair dealing on the trade world of Vega Prime. Merchant Ticklin was closing another successful deal with human traders. His business had grown dramatically since he had started working with the human trading networks. The humans paid fair prices, delivered goods on time, and never tried to cheat their partners. "Thank you for your business," said the human captain. A friendly woman named Nancy Williams. "We will have your next shipment ready in 2 weeks." Ticklin shook her hand, still amazed by how different human business practices were from what he had experienced with other species. "Captain Williams, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do humans always keep their promises?" "Other species sometimes break contracts when it is profitable for them, but humans never do," Nancy smiled. "Because trust is more valuable than profit? If we break our word once, no one will ever trust us again. And without trust, business is impossible." It was such a simple concept, but it was one that many species had never understood. They had been too focused on short-term gains to think about long-term relationships. The humans, on the other hand, had built their entire civilization on the idea that keeping promises was more important than making quick profits. As Nancy's ship departed for its next destination, Ticklin thought about the old days when he had worked with Council-approved merchants. Those deals had always been complicated, full of hidden fees and unexpected conditions. The paperwork had been confusing, and payments had often been delayed for months. Working with humans was completely different. The contracts were simple and clear. The payments were always on time. If there were problems, the humans worked to solve them instead of trying to avoid responsibility. It was no wonder that more and more species were choosing to work with human traders instead of Council-approved merchants. The human way was not only more honest, it was also more profitable for everyone involved. Back in the ruins of the old Council territory, Chairman Vexthari sat in his office reading the latest reports. The numbers were grim but not hopeless. Crime rates were still high, but they were slowly decreasing. Economic growth was weak, but it was positive for the first time in 3 years. Some of the smaller conflicts had been resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. The galaxy was learning to survive without the humans. It was a painful process, and many had suffered, but the remaining species were gradually developing the skills they needed to solve their own problems. They were learning to cooperate with each other, to share resources, and to put aside old prejudices, but they were also learning how much they had lost. Every day brought reminders of what the galaxy had been like when humans were part of it. The peace, the prosperity, the sense that problems could be solved if people worked together, all of that was gone, replaced by a harder, more desperate world where survival was never guaranteed. The humans had not just left the galaxy. They had taken with them a vision of what galactic civilization could be. Without that vision, the remaining species were building something smaller and more limited, a civilization based on necessity rather than hope. It was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations. Some losses are so great that they change the fundamental nature of what remains.